Hello dreamers, and a warm welcome to the latest installment of my Warframe lore series. As teased in the previous video, our focus today is on Duviri, an exploration into its essence and true nature, building upon our earlier discussion, where emotions and profound contemplation can materialize as tangible entities within the void. This episode offers a first-hand encounter with the consequences of such manifestations. Join me as we unravel the depths of these phenomena, understanding how far these manifestations can extend. So, unwind, grab a snack, and embrace the enigma that is Duviri. Recall the days of youth, where tales of legend captured our imagination, trials of Hercules, the mystical city of Atlantis, and the epic Trojan War. These narratives, echoing throughout time, find parallel existence in the chronicles of Warframe. Consider the very names of Warframes such as Excalibur, resonating with the legendary sword of King Arthur, Loki, embodying the Norse trickster god, Titania, mirroring the female counterparts of the Titans of Greek mythology, and Wukong, paying homage to the Monkey King of Chinese folklore. In the intricate fabric of Warframe's lore, a remarkable volume emerges: the Tales of Duviri. Created by Illyria Andrade, this collection draws from stories handed down by her father. These tales, transformed into a tool, serve a noble purpose, guiding the young minds aboard the Zariman 10-0. Tales of Duviri becomes more than a book. It's a conduit for imparting emotional resilience. Delving into depths of joy, anger, greed, sadness, and fear, it addresses the potent emotions that thrive in the void, where unchecked sentiments can spiral into chaos. As we delve into the history, we revisit the maiden voyage of the Zariman 10-0, a voyage that led to its disappearance into the void. A flashback unveils the concept of eternalism, a theory challenging the conventional view of time. Past and future become as tangible as the present, accessible by changing the frame of reference. This intriguing perspective aligns with the extraterrestrial understanding of time in the movie Arrival, viewing it as a tool to access moments rather than a linear progression. However, this unique perspective gives rise to complexity, introducing branching timelines and alternate realities. Within this intricate framework, the tale of the Drifter takes root, unfolding in the vast expanse of branching timelines and the enigmatic landscape of alternate realities. When the Zariman made its maiden jump from the fold near Saturn, things descended into chaos rather quickly. Parents became feral and crazed, and even began hunting their own children. Terrified, the children barricaded themselves in a large room and hid from the adults, while the adults searched the ship, cold, scared, and alone. Aside from the other children, they became more and more terrified of the thought of death, wishing they had never boarded the ship. But one child was brave. They wished they could save the others, keep them safe, and put an end to the adults. They meditated on this idea hard enough that an entity visited the child and offered them a way to save the others. This is the moment the Tenno were created and bestowed their void powers. This serves as the prevailing narrative, offering a semblance of understanding until Duviri paradox unravels further complexities. The recent events in the New War introduce the concept of alternate timelines, where our Tenno grapples with madness upon encountering a mysterious entity. In one distinctive timeline, however, diverges significantly, presenting a reality where our Tenno doesn't become the familiar force of the Tenno, but transforms into something entirely different. In this peculiar scenario, the child isolates themselves with the tales of Duviri, a figurine of Dominus Thrax from the book. Immersed in the tales to an extreme, the child eventually believes they inhabit the very world of the book, leading to an abrupt transition into that realm, while the new war introduces us to the concept of conceptual embodiment, manifesting notably with the crew of the Zeramin. This particular instance stands as perhaps the most profound manifestation of this phenomenon, at least until further investigations into Albrecht and Trotti's laboratories unfold, a topic that will be explored more comprehensively in his dedicated video. This version, or variant, of Arteno is referred to as the Drifter, which is actually a fitting name for this instance of our character. This version of us has become lost in the void, drifting on the islands of Duviri. During the course of this, events from our main timeline seem to drift into Duviri, as well as the Drifter themselves drifting into our timeline. The latter two events are very interesting, as they hint at a much earlier multi-timeline connection to Arteno before the two would actually connect with one another. Thankfully, with the concept of eternalism, this is completely possible, and seems to explain the events of Warframe's timeline being out of sync. So now, let us take a closer look at the events of Duviri. However, I will not be alone in this. I will be consulting with Acrithis, Duviri's resident archivist.
In all the ages of Thrax's reign, only 2 strangers have ever been known to come to Duviri. One was the monk Teshin, who fell from the sky into the lake on the island we now call Hermit's Landing. Seemingly lifeless, he was dragged ashore by Mithila, who nursed his return to health. I have never known a constitution to match his, yet, unlike us, he has deteriorated with the passing of time. The other stranger came far earlier in Thrax's reign, before even the bleeding earth. The stranger had haunted eyes and a downcast mien, and spoke of the wall and the worlds beyond. He wore his hair like looped snakes, and his voice carried an accent unlike any in Duviri. With the king's permission, he constructed a great laboratory of light-smoking mirrors and void lanthorns, which he claimed was the match of one he had once owned in a former life. The island where it stood was known as Scholar's Landing. The time would come, the stranger said, when Duviri would be needed. There was a work of repentance to be done, and he could not do it alone. What he meant by this, I cannot say, and cannot now ask, for Scholar's Landing vanished overnight. But I shall watch, and wait, and hope.
Building upon Acrithis' revelations, it becomes evident that Duviri transcends mere figments of the Drifter's imagination. It is a tangible realm, now existing and accessible within the void. Through the right means of travel, this prompts a fascinating shift in perspective toward our own reality, drawing parallels to the concept of the tulpa. A tulpa, or thought form, originates from ancient Buddhist beliefs, a wellspring from which Warframe seemingly draws various concepts. According to this belief, Through intensive meditation, thoughts or emotions can materialize as real entities, often taking human form. While this idea has inspired intriguing narratives in media, often leaning towards horror, such as the Mandela Catalog and Greylock, Duviri amplifies the concept tenfold. Here, the Drifter hasn't just birthed beings, they have woven an entire culture and society, shaped by the tales of Duviri and their experiences in the tangible world.
The island of Manipura was Duviri's vineyard. The Calaventi merchant sisterhood had villas there. Their tenant farmers raised succulent grapes to be turned into wine, which was taken as a tribute to be shared among the Dax. Tribute Day was a great celebration in the Dax barracks, as the veiled Yaskotai would pour bowl after bowl of wine. Comrades would show old wounds and tell tall tales of how they were come by, and old songs would be sung late into the night. The Calaventi were proud. They considered themselves reflections of the true Orokin, and though they bent the knee to Thrax, they did not respect him. With his changeable moods and his short stature, Thrax was, they whispered, merely an upstart, an imitator. It was the servants who alerted Thrax to their master's insolence. If they expected to be rewarded for this, oh, well, more fool them. A terrible Orroworm was sent to, and I quote, trample the Calaventi sisterhood as they trample their grapes. With no warning, the Orroworm burst through the island from beneath, shattering it to fragments. If the Dax of Duviri resent the loss of their wine tribute, they know better than to speak of it. The island...
A telltale sign of this is the presence of Dax soldiers, remnants of the Orokin Empire, fragments and landmarks from the Zeramin, and the Cavalenti believing they were Orokin, as well as Orokin architecture dotting the landscape of Duviri. The peculiar skeletal appearance of Duviri's animals, initially perplexing, aligns with the educational material the Zeramin's children were exposed to. Anatomy slides featuring the skeletal structures and bodily systems of Kubros, Kavats, and even horses during class rationalize the skeletal aspect of Duviri's fauna. The nomenclature, like Krubi for Kubro-like canines, and Tam for ram-like creatures, resonates with the innocent mispronunciations a child might make, further solidifying the notion that the Drifter conceived Duviri during their childhood on the Zeramin.
The Necropolis Island was once one of the largest in Duviri and the strangest. It appeared to be a sprawling burial ground littered with gravestones, wooden crosses, sarcophagi, and ornate tombs. But those who broke into these places found that there were no bodies to loot. Not a cadaver. Not a skull. Not even a tooth. Instead, each coffin contained a simulacrum of the human form in various stages of decay. Entire skeletons carved out of wood, corpses of rotting straw stuffed into old clothes, mouldering faces sculpted in crumbling clay, little bones laboriously whittled down from large bones. I have never been able to make any sense of it. The doll mausoleum did not even attempt to imitate an authentic burial structure. It was built to far too small a scale. The cavities within it were tiny, each one holding a coffin that contained a miniature human figure. These were of all genders, often with brightly coloured hair, all wearing odd, one-piece hooded suits of black leather. Thrax was known to visit the mausoleum alone. I do not know what he did there. Now, the place is lost to the void. A mystery that shall remain so forever. Isn't that maddening?
This entry by Acrithis seems to suggest that the lone child, the Drifter, created a memorial to the other children who were lost on the Zariman. The dolls she describes are oddly similar to the figurine of Thrax our Tenno had on the Zariman, and they are described as having bright hair and odd hooded leather clothes, which is not unlike the colored hair and jumpsuits the children wore. According to Acrithis, Alberic imparted knowledge to the inhabitants of Duviri, revealing that there was more beyond the Zariman, beyond the curtain encircling the islands. With permission from the king, Alberic materialized Scholar's Landing, a recreation of his original laboratory on Deimos. Originally intended as a form of self-exile, a retirement space until his demise, Alberic's perspective shifted upon recognizing the true nature of Duviri, inspired by his daughter. Rather than succumb to bitterness, Alberic tore the island away, reintegrating it into the Sol system, and embarking on a new project to rectify past mistakes. Details of this endeavor will be explored in a future video, but for now, let's direct our focus to the next significant event in Duviri, the Bleeding Earth.
The island was called Cornucopia for its fecundity. The soil, dark and rich, yielded tubers and greens that shimmered with life. Wagons laden with tribute would go tottering up to the palace in procession. All this was, of course, the will of the king, for what is a kingdom without its peasants? Thus had he created the islands, and thus they remained, day after indolent day. Then, on a morning like any other, Farmer Hovril drove his spade into the earth and brought up blood. Blood welled up from the gash like crimson oil. As Hovril looked on, stupefied, the rivulet reached the road and began to pool. The shocked cries of other farmers rang out as their furrows too began to fill with blood. The stuff was dark, almost black. It had a heavy metallic odor suffused with grave spices. One venturesome soul tasted it. His eyes instantly became pitch orbs, his voice a smoky whisper. Panic ensued. The judgment of Dominus Thrax. The Dax came swiftly, the roads were barricaded, and Cornucopia was isolated from Duviri. Later that day, a great orreworm shattered the bridges. The island was set adrift, inhabitants and all. Oh. The last sight I had of them was a row of wide-eyed, pleading faces watching me steadily as they vanished into the void.
While a torrent of blood erupting from the earth is a horrifying sight, I believe this marks the next occurrence of an important event from the real world bleeding through. After looking at the history of the Sol system, this seems to align with the collapse of the Orokin Empire, specifically the betrayal of the Tenno. As mentioned by Acrithis, the island was named Cornucopia for its fecundity. Note her use of the word fecundity rather than fertility, as we would generally describe soil. The meaning of the word is the ability to produce an abundance of offspring or new growth. But it has a secondary meaning, the ability to produce many new ideas. This is very appropriate given the nature of Duviri we have established thus far. This idea of abundance and new growth mimics the golden age of the Orokin era, with their Kuva and void travel, as well as their control of the Sol system. The abrupt surge of crimson emanating from the island seems to intricately tie to the Tenno's actions in eradicating the Orokin. As the Tenno unsheathed their blades, severing the elite and initiating the infamous betrayal, the island responded with a visceral release of red energy. What adds an intriguing layer to this revelation is the apparent connection between the Drifter and the events unfolding in the Sol system. Despite our Tenno not formally establishing a direct connection with the Drifter, there's an uncanny awareness on the Drifter's part regarding the Tenno's actions, suggesting a mysterious link transcending the conventional bounds of communication.
For Lake Varula to be lost and forgotten is a lasting bitterness to me. There was a time when it was Duviri's festival spot. On the anniversary of Thrax's coronation, the citizenry would build ceremonial floating islands. On these, they would drift, sing, play music, and light fragrant lanterns in honor of Thrax. Attracted by the music, the rainbow eels would rise from the lake bed, poke their iridescent heads above the water, and sing. Lucinia had a school of them that followed her across the lake and floundered on the shore when she disembarked, as if they yearned to remain with her. We could not know that down on the lake bed a portal to the Undercroft had formed. Predatory creatures writhed in. They were golden, slender, with massive fanged bivalve maws. And they were ravenous. They devoured the rainbow eels, and then they devoured each other until only a handful were left. Lake Varula had no more magic after that. Thrax ordered the lake drained, but the golden moors merely burrowed into Duviri's crust, where to this day they can sometimes be found plundering our pools.
This entry seems to also be connected to the Orokin Empire beyond the wall as well. In this, Acrithis states that this lake was used in a time of abundance, most likely alongside Cornucopia. However, after some time, a portal to the Undercroft was opened at the bottom of the lake, and golden serpent-like creatures came through and started to consume the creatures of the lake, as well as themselves. This, to me, at least seems to symbolize how the Orokin slowly consumed the solar system, and eventually began to turn on one another, leading to the formation of the Corpus and Grineer as their own factions.
In the splendid lands on this side of the wall lives happy Mathila, and she has 2 children. She also had a husband in her yesterdays. When I have attempted to talk to her about him, she has simply frozen, like a rat before a snake. His name was Garmy, and he was keeper of the Seraglass Lighthouse on Watcher's Island. The lighthouse served no true purpose, yet he kept its lamp burning, beaming out into the void as if to call travelers home. Now, before his death, Garmy confided in me that he felt his role was important. He was keeping it at bay. Void storms were not unknown in Duviri, but the storm I shall speak of was unlike others. It hung in a red veil across the sky. There was a great sound like tearing metal, and all at once a pelting rain fell. Not water, but broken metal chains in lengths and coils and great rattling whip strands. The falling chains shattered roofs and windows, slashed through screaming livestock, and maimed the fools who had not come in from the streets. I found Garmy's log in the toppled ruin of the lighthouse. With admirable presence of mind, he describes a form steadily approaching out of the void. A monstrous hand, possessed of only 3 fingers and a thumb. With the lighthouse gone, Watcher's Island crumbled, and was gone too within 3 spirals. Garmy has no grave nor memorial, as if he had never lived. But I remember, and so I record.
This log from Acrithis seems to describe events that mirror Arteno's actions in the Chains of Harrow. In this quest, we are tasked with helping the Red Veil free their founder, a unique Tenno named Rel, who has been trapped inside his Warframe named Harrow. During this quest, we face various dark figures, as well as what seems to be Rel himself, in the form of a shadowy, shade-like being. This has always been odd to me. If we're helping Rel, why would he seemingly be trying to stop us? Throughout the quest, we are given very interesting dialogue from Palladino, the mystic of the Red Veil and the Lotus. It would seem that Rel is aware of an entity in the void and is actively stopping it from breaking into our reality.
Rap, tap, tap. Speak to us. We're listening. What is your name? Good. You remember. We want to help you, Rel. Tell us where you are. Can't. He's listening. Who? Rel? Who is listening? Rap, tap, tap. Rap, tap, tap.
How could Rel have lived this long without the long dream?
In a way, he didn't. He knew his mortality would undo his purpose, so he gave up his humanity forever. He committed his soul to the undying vessel.
As Warframe.
Yes, he commanded we chain it within the depths of the sacred temple, an eternal vigil against the indifference.
And you believed him. You helped him do it.
Yes, after everything you've seen, wouldn't you?
Now, delving into the intricate and lore-laden narrative surrounding Rel warrants a dedicated exploration in a separate video. However, a fascinating parallel emerges when we draw connections between Rel and Garmy. Garmy's fixation on maintaining the illumination of his lighthouse, warding off a monstrous form emerging from the void, mirrors Rel's obsessive commitment to keeping the ominous man in the wall at bay. The striking similarity is underscored by Palladino, who refers to Rel as a guiding light, which is the typical function of a lighthouse.
Our temple, our home, his tomb. Come, meet our guiding light.
Now, Garmy's mission unfolds as a deliberate course of action, not a spontaneous manifestation of the Drifter, given that the King exhibits no prior awareness until connecting with Arteno. Instead, it appears to be a consequence of Alberic's interference. In his codex entry on Duviri, Alberic discloses his role in informing the inhabitants about the Indifference, an entity in the void that he uniquely terms. This revelation sheds light on the intricacies of Duviri, emphasizing Alberic's pivotal role in unraveling the mysteries and challenges within this enigmatic realm.
In Duviri, I woke every day to the voice of my daughter. I recoiled from this at first, feeling the sting of conscience. I could not confront, even in semblance, the woman I had abandoned. Instead, I reinvented myself as a teacher, advising the Child King of the menace beyond his borders. But as the days melted away, I came to recognize the strange cast of characters Euleria had created and their purpose. I heard voices I had myself first conjured in the darkness of her childhood chambers for no other reward than her delight. She had not only preserved this gift I had thought so trivial, she had made it an instrument of healing. More, a stronghold. Despite my legacy of neglect, despite my shoddy example, my needs, my demands, my daughter had triumphed in my absence. Her confidence, her warmth, shamed me. I had fled from the horror, but she had stood alongside the most vulnerable, those with the most to lose, and told them a different story. I did not perceive the significance of Euleria's stance at first. Her concern for the children was not merely pastoral attentiveness. It was a direct strike against the indifference. She was teaching the weak to be strong in the very places where those cold fingers would reach, and through her act of compassion, spitting in the face of alienation and despair. Could I do less? Shame is an inert state, but fertile. It primes the mind, bolstering it for repentance. I had thought to make a difference in Duviri, but Duviri had made a difference in me. My own daughter's creations, reverberating and growing in the womb of the void, had shown me another path than that of the indulgent coward. I was neither helpless nor irredeemable. Like she had, I could fight. I took inspiration from Euleria's example. To the people of Duviri, I bequeathed a legacy of cautionary stories. In them, I spoke of fears that an infinity of spirals could not erase. I slipped away from those lands, silent and unnoticed, from their joys, their sadnesses, from the celebration in my honor. In her, they already had all they needed. My work, I now understood, must proceed from a different point. I would confront the phantom of myself and deny it to the teeth.
Transference energy. Fractured. It was so cold, indifferent, inhuman. If Rel was Tenno, what did he become without Margulis?
Holy Rel, let us bring you the peace you have earned. Guide this Tenno so you can return to the Harrowing vessel, so that you might rest.
Rel's warnings. Those dire consequences. He was talking about void exposure, wasn't he? The effect it has on human minds is well understood.
But it's not. This isn't some kind of deep pressure bends as Margulis suspected. Rel saw what it was. Truly, an entity. Indifferent. Old as stars.
Alberic's view on the void seamlessly resonates with the perspectives shared by both the Lotus and Palladino in their descriptions of the void. During the climax of the Chains of Harrow quest, we enter the depths of the Red Veil Temple and confront Rel. But this is not Rel. Not anymore. In every other instance of Rel speaking, it is a voice of a child. However, when Rel speaks to us in the temple, it is the voice of an adult. This voice also speaks about and even seemingly to Rel, indicating this is a different entity. This is also addressed by Palladino during the event. It seems that this entity is in fact the very thing Rel was trying to prevent from getting into our reality. Now, I'd like to shift our gaze briefly to Rel's Warframe, Harrow. The term Harrow is used by Palladino several times throughout the quest, and is a very interesting choice of words. In psychological terms, a harrowing experience is one that would inflict trauma and distress, or make one feel disturbed, which is very fitting to the theme of void exposure and what it does to the mind, as we have mentioned in our previous video. However, harrow has another meaning. A harrow is a tool used to uproot and cultivate soil for new growth, which seems to be an allegory to the man in the wall using Rel and his Warframe as a vessel.
When the children of Duviri were educated. Upon the island of Academe, within its chalky caves, in rough-hewn classrooms lit by burning blue gas, sages taught them everything they would need to know. They learned of the 7 principles, the geometries, the primords, the harmonics and resonances, the sacred stories, and, most importantly, the unquestionable benignity of Dominus Thrax. And then, not long after the reign of chains, the first of the Hollow Children appeared. They joined the others for class, sitting at the back, silent and attentive. Their eyes were a deep and lustrous black, their mouths fixed in a constant grin. None of the sages saw them enter or leave. The Hollow Children did not speak, nor did they participate in class in any way, except to giggle unnervingly when the subject of the void was mentioned. When adults came to collect their children, they noticed an additional oddity. Among the Hollow Children were exact duplicates of themselves when they were younger. Each day there were more of them. Thrax ordered the island destroyed, but when Loden descended from the sky to ravage it, the aura worm found it had broken free of its own accord. Thrax did not give the order to pursue.
It would seem that the reign of chains Acrithis talks about is the moment Arteno broke the chains holding Harrow in the temple, and this bled over into Duviri. At the end of the quest, we are greeted by a doppelganger of Arteno, who calls us Kiddo, indicating that the entity was also freed alongside Rel. But not just into our Tenno's reality. The shadow children Akrithis mentions seem to parallel this entity our Tenno meets, and it would seem that it starts to spread in Duviri. However, before Thrax could destroy the island, it drifted away of its own accord, mirroring Alberic's island, Scholar's Landing. After this emergence in his kingdom, Thrax seems to become terrified of the Indifference and what it is capable of. So much so that Thrax starts to order the destruction of any island that begins to show its presence.
How I loved the Galleria. It was an island of simple beauty where white statues rose out of the ground as if they had grown there. They were classical in their features, masked in due propriety, each bearing an instrument or an emblem of their craft. I gave them names. The Scribe, the Scryer, the Shawsonist. On days when the mist of Thrax's sorrow hung among the marble columns, a sober chill seemed to drape the Galleria. One could not wish for a better spot to cool a burning head. This kingdom is often mad, but this was a space for sanity. That peace was shattered one morning as I drove my carriage there. I witnessed a vast form break up from the ground and clumsily probe the area around it. I took the thing for a gigantic worm or slug until one of my escorting Dax pointed out the colossal fingernail on its head. We turned on our heel and made for the palace, where I gave Dominus Thrax the best account I could of what I had seen. On hearing that a single monstrous finger had burst up through the green sward, Thrax took terrible fright. Despite my entreaties, he sacrificed the entire island before any more of the entity could emerge.
Now, we cannot say for certain whether these events happened before or after the Reign of Chains, but based on how Akrithis writes this entry, I believe it's the latter. It seems that much like in our Tenno's reality with Rel, once Garmy and his lighthouse was lost, the man in the wall was able to seep into Duviri and corrupt the very land itself, as mentioned with the finger erupting out of the Galleria and the hollow children of Academe. However, within Duviri lurks a being only known as the Vagabond, a mysterious figure unlike any other in Duviri. The Vagabond wears a unique mask, although another entity does seem to don it as well, but more on that in the next section. When we approach the Vagabond, they will begin laughing hysterically and stare at our drifter. However, as soon as we look away, the Vagabond will disappear with no further interaction. If we inspect them further, we will notice that the Vagabond is missing a finger, alluding to the entity we spoke of in our previous video. All of the people in Duviri seem to not notice the Vagabond, except for one, Sithel.
The first scholar looked into the void and he feared it. And his fear took shape. Do you understand? That's how all this started. I've seen them. my children, pointing at me. Listen, there. Did you hear it? Rap, tap, tap.
Sithel is Duviri's personification of fear, and she does not take this duty lightly. Sithel suffers from constant crippling anxiety and paranoia, bordering on schizophrenia, seeing and hearing things that aren't not there. But what if Sithel's paranoia was warranted? When Duviri is in a fear spiral, the vagabond can be found outside Sithel's house, opposite the side of the wall she is listening to. Sithel clearly is aware of the vagabond, as she also hears the tapping on the wall, the signature of the indifference. However, there seems to be a reason for this, as Sithel seems to be the only citizen of Duviri to read the journal of Alberic Dentradi. As she states, she is aware of Alberic entering the void and meeting the other, and wants to be rid of the books, fearing what other horrors lurk within. It would seem that only those who know of the indifference can actually interact with it. Otherwise, they are unbeknownst to the happenings of the man in the wall.
I am naturally curious. I can hardly help it. And so, I set this down for any that follow in my footsteps who wonder, as I have, about our home. Today, Duviri is a mere scattering of islands, set about the palace as if they had spilled forth from it, but in the dawning time when the kingdom was new, it was a kingdom worthy of the name. From horizon to horizon lay island after island, each one different, bearing distinctive colour and life. I have flown on Caithback until the Ark Harbour was lost to sight, and then on again, and have been unable to number the lands over which I flew. Every one of them raised its banners to Thrax. Nothing remains of those islands now. Not a tree, not a leaf, not a grain of sand. It seems some of the lost islands were smashed by Thrax the king, as a child might smash a toy. Others have been obliterated by hazards unknown. The void is an ocean, it is said, and monsters dwell in its depths. But the vast majority of the islands have simply fallen to the void's creeping encroachment as the tides wear away at the land. I dream of a lost island returning one happy day, or an entirely new island appearing, birthed from the void. But this place has not changed in so long, except for the worse, and there is no reason for hope. One day, I am sure, the void will engulf us all.
It would seem that once Arteno awoke from the dream, Duviri started to crumble, with no new islands appearing, only losing them. Then, as the Tenno starts to meddle in the soul system, so too is Duviri affected. The vagabond seems to parallel the Tenno's doppelganger, as both the words drifter and vagabond can describe the same person, which would explain why the doppelganger is not present in Duviri. With his original vessel destroyed, perhaps the indifference set his sights on Duviri. When listening to the Duviri Paradox soundtrack, towards the end, very ominous music begins playing, and if one listens closely, the music takes the shape of a very familiar voice. Take a listen. Do you hear it? However, there is one pivotal piece of evidence that undeniably solidifies the Drifter as the creator of Duviri, their personal Warframe, Kullervo. This enigmatic entity stands as a testament to the Drifter's profound influence, embodying the essence of Duviri in its sinuous form. Kullervo, intricately crafted, serves as a living confirmation of the symbiotic connection between its creator and the surreal realm, further affirming the Drifter's role as the architect of Duviri. Based on what the Warden says, it can be speculated that Kullervo is meant to be a tulpa representing the Tenno as a whole, showing yet another connection to the Tenno, but also as a representation of the Drifter. The reason I say that Kullervo is the Drifter's Warframe is due to the materials required to craft Kullervo. Every piece required comes from Duviri. A signature ingredient in Warframe construction, the Orokin cell, is completely missing from his blueprint requirements. The Warframe also requires a special item, however, Kullervo's Bane. These seem to be fragments or memories of the events that are listed as his 7.
Do not pity the beast. He knows what he did. He cannot forget. That is the nail I force back into his skull every day. You, Kullervo, thought an executor's favor was a thing to be stolen and worn. You spilled precious Orokin blood before seeking the executor out for approval. Hated Kullervo, did you truly believe he could love you? You are forevermore a low murderer. See where he rots, the mother killer, the betrayer, the ingrate.
In this log, the Warden talks about Kullervo taking someone's life as a means to impress an executor, most likely Ballas. As it is known, Ballas has his way of achieving power. This is most likely an act carried out by the Tenno, as in our character from the main timeline. This could mean then that our Tenno saw Ballas as a father figure, much like how they see Margulis as a mother.
You witnessed the slaughter as the Orokin eradicated your defective, demented brothers and sisters, and did nothing to aid them, choosing to tremble in your cowardly seclusion. A traitor twice over. Kullervo, bloody-handed, I charge you with cowardice. You cannot deny your sin, Kullervo, for I am your guilt, the form and voice of your greatest persecutor.
In the second log, the Warden states Kullervo witnessed the murder of the Tenno by the hands of the Orokin. However, as we know events, this never happened in the Tenno's timeline. This log, therefore, more than likely refers to the adults on the Zariman attacking the children, hence Orokin attacking Tenno. The Drifter, as a child, was too scared to act and hid away with the Book of Duviri.
The Archimedean Ainiki, your mother, lived. And you, like the vermin you are, scurried after her. in butchering the Dax whom the executors charged with taking you into just custody, you, laughably, managed to kill the very woman you came to rescue. The third charge. Flight from just custody. Kulavo. His mother, Ainiki, named him well. Cursed from the moment of his creation.
This log also relates to the Drifter, and, in my interpretation at least, tells of how the Drifter was forced to take the life of his own mother while escaping the other adults on the Zeramin. Hence why it is said Kullervo was attempting to save his mother, which doesn't really make any sense if we take this log.
Kullervo. His mother, Ainiki, named him well. Cursed from the moment of his creation. Upon the arrival of the wretched Tenno, you struck. Out of what? A desire for redemption? You thought to strike the Orokin where it hurt. Their laboratories, their edifices of government, their homes. To distract, to buy time. Idiot. You are charged with treason. Rage until you burst, Kullervo. You shall never taste freedom again. Again. You new generation of your kind, and the Tenno whose deviltry blent with theirs. And you began to whisper corruption into their ears. Weave dark thoughts through the coils of their minds, incepting, as is your wont, chaos and disaster. You are charged with espionage. The fool sought oblivion, as if I could not pursue him wherever he went. I, his conscience, his jailer. The night of the Naga drums. Your incepted chaos bloomed, and the beautiful gilded empire fell. Were you entirely responsible? Of course not. You are, after all, a fool. But one need not be entirely responsible for the murder of an empire to be punished for their role in it. And punished you shall be, for a second count of treason. Again and again, Kullervo revealed the slaughter-drunk beast he was. Again and again, I locked him away.
In these logs, the Warden seems to talk about how the Tenno became to understand what the Orokin had truly done to them, and what they had thought of them. Interestingly, the Warden makes a point to mention how Kullervo might not be the only one who acted, but seems to believe he is the one who started the collapse, and therefore is punished as such. While it might be a stretch, I believe our Tenno may be the ones who spread the knowledge of the Orokin to the rest of the Tenno, which ultimately led to the night of the Naga drums. This would mean that our Tenno was privy to knowledge the other Tenno were not, possibly due to our friend on the other side of the
I
wall.
locked him away. As the Empire heard, you found the one executor you coveted and despised most. You presume to raise your foul hand against him, one of the seven. But he did not die so readily as you had hoped. Thus, I lay upon your wretched head your ultimate crime, attempted regicide. And with it, your punishment, and the Executor's eternal vengeance. You crave the sun, Kulivo, but the sun is not far. Squat in your dull stone prison and sob. Do not block my light. I keep him locked up here for his own safety, and that of all Duviri. Care to find out why?
The final log is very interesting, as it seems to hint Arteno attempted to kill Ballas, but was of course unsuccessful. While this would be attempted by Arteno during the sacrifice, I believe this log seems to be referencing an event that happened during the collapse. This would mean that Arteno and Ballas have a much longer rivalry than previously thought, and honestly makes him a very fitting villain for the new war. Oddly enough, this is the only jail cell which does not hold a variant of Kullervo. Instead, it is caved in, most likely representing the fact that Ballas was not killed, which raises new questions about what really happened to Ballas at the end of the new war. There is one final interaction we can have with Kullervo, however. If we approach the Warden will offer us the ability to fight Kullervo in his arena. While this fight is challenging, it's the final phase of the fight that I want to draw your attention to. In this phase, Kullervo is joined by Liminus, shadowy, shade-like beings who seem to represent fear and anger on Duviri. These Liminus are unique, however, as they wield the daggers buried deep into Kullervo's torso, and just happen to wear the Mask of the Vagabond. However, these Liminus do not seem to harm Kullervo, but instead give him more abilities than he previously had. This seems to be symbolizing the man in the wall, giving the Tenno's gifts of power. After the fight concludes, we do not harm Kullervo or execute him, despite the Warden telling us to do so. Instead, Kullervo kneels and relaxes, much like Umbra after we calm him. This is why I stated that I believe Kullervo's bane are most likely the memories of what truly happened. Once we understand and can control the emotions associated with these memories, we are able to build and use Kullervo. After this extensive look at Duviri, we can summarize that this is truly a thought form of the Drifter, due to their isolation on the Zariman after the Void Jump. The Drifter created a safe place, a place away from the horrors of the ship and the empire they left behind, a place where they could be with their friends and family, and live new lives together, until the Drifter was drugged into our world, and connected with the Tenno across space and time. From there, Duviri Paradox is really a tale about our Drifter reclaiming their humanity, for who they truly are, and allowing themselves to move on from their past traumas and start a new life. Duviri is a reminder to us that while life can be crippling
Your
and
life,
unbearable at times,
your dreams, your self. No matter where you go, there you are. This loop you're in, maybe it's not so bad after all. It's not a trap or habit or a sentence. It's just your life, waiting for you to live it.
Thank you all so much for watching, and I apologize for how long this video took to get out. It was way more than I thought it was going to be, and it honestly just kept growing and growing as I wrote the script. I originally planned on talking about the Undercroft as well in this video, but due to the nature of the Undercroft and the length of this video already, I'm deciding to include it in my next video about the Zariman 10-0. Thank you again for watching, and if you're still here, please consider giving the video a like, and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you want to see more from me. If you haven't already, check out my first video in the series on the Void itself, as it explains a lot of things referenced here. I hope you all take care, and have a good rest of your day, Dreamers. This is the voice of the old ones, signing off, and I'll talk to you all again.